Looking back over the 34 years since the Assumptions That Affect Our Lives book came out, I can say without hesitation that the overall condition of society is far worse today than it was back then. When I wrote the book, it was written from the perspective of a passenger ship fast approaching an iceberg. But if I wrote it today, I would write from the perspective of a passenger ship having struck an iceberg. We are in an all-hands-on-deck situation. The iceberg has put a gash in the side of our ship. How many compartments have been breached is the question. The Titanic was built to withstand a breaching of 4 compartments, but in her case, 5 were breached. One thing I know for sure is we have an urgent need for quality Christian education. As was mentioned in the introduction to Chapter 7, Christian education is about equipping the next generation to govern well over this material world. This means equipping today's students to be tomorrow's Christ-honoring participants in business, law, education, the media, and the arts, public policy, and civil service, as well as Christ-honoring carpenters, electricians, and homemakers, not to mention pastors and missionaries. That's what I call the yeast effect. This is taking the long view. But there are some things we can do in the short term also. One or two of the recommendations I'm about to share here might be more than you're ready for, but I'm laying them out here for you to consider. Number 1, let's engage in focused spiritual warfare en masse. The Bible says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. In other words, against demons. Not metaphorical demons, but real ones. What does wrestling against spiritual forces in high places actually mean, and how do we do it? Pastors, if you're watching, we need help in knowing how to wrestle against principalities and powers in high places. Let's learn to do this, and let's do it en masse. As I said, we're in an all-hands-on-deck situation. Number 2, let's take our kids out of public schools en masse. You may have already removed your children from the state schools, but many Christian parents continue to send their children there. The time when some of us thought we could send our kids to public schools to be missionaries is long past. Let's train our children to be missionaries in the neighborhood. Pastors, once again, we need your help in this matter, both in calling parishioners to pull their children out of the public schools and training on how to be missionaries in the neighborhood, and not just the kids. Number 3, let's break the monopoly of state schools in such a way that Christian schools can function economically without being tied to state strings in any way. Let's work to change the school funding system so 50% of annual tax payments made by property owners goes directly to the school of the taxpayer's choice, bypassing the state coffers entirely. Certain laws may prohibit states from funding Christian schools. Well, okay, the solution is to bypass the state entirely. Let's allow the taxpayers to pay 50% of their property taxes directly to the school of their choice. That's a different kind of school choice that we need to consider. The money follows the student idea is only good if the state doesn't follow the money. The probability of breaking the financial stronghold of state schools soon is not high. Yet in the meantime, about 90% of American K-12 students continue to attend state schools, mostly because the state schools are free. Until the monopoly of funding is broken, here are some things we can focus on. Number 4, let's fill the majority seats of public school boards with Christ followers. Even if you send your children to Christian schools or you don't have children at all, you can serve on a local public school board. But it doesn't help much for Christ-following school board members to be in the minority. We need to be strategic about this. Let's also bear in mind that school boards follow mandates from above them. State level directives need to be changed, and this involves getting Christ followers into legislative seats and other state level positions. The yeast effect must be working at all levels. Number 5, if you are a Christian teacher or administrator called to public education, stay where you are. But speak up when you see things going on that shouldn't be. Better to be fired for the right reason than to quit. Number 6, if obscene materials are in your school library or used in classrooms, as is the case today in many state schools, this is a violation of federal obscenity law, and it is a criminal offense. According to the U.S. Department of Justice, any transfer or attempt to transfer such material to a minor under the age of 16 is punishable under federal law. Convicted offenders face fines and imprisonment, and educators are not exempt. I'll put links in the description below for more information on federal obscenity laws from the Department of Justice. For federal obscenity laws to be enforced, however, it requires federal prosecutors to bring charges. I think it would be great if in the future we had 10-year-olds standing in the hallways of their homes looking up at their mothers and saying, "Mom, the one job on planet Earth that I'd really like to do is to be a federal prosecutor." In the meantime, there may be federal prosecutors out there now who might be courageous enough to bring charges if they knew they had community support. How about encouraging federal law enforcement in your area to enforce federal obscenity laws that already exist and to work toward putting offending teachers, librarians, administrators, and school board members behind bars? Now that's getting serious for the protection of children, all children. Number 7, there are also federal laws on the books prohibiting racial discrimination, which is an increasing problem. Much of the application of critical race theory in schools and government agencies through diversity, equity, and inclusion programs produces racial prejudice, particularly towards Caucasians and Asians. We need to get serious about removing DEI programs from tax-supported institutions. And here's another suggestion, again directed toward pastors. Number 8, pastors, if you're watching, please speak up regarding the moral issues of our day. I'm not suggesting you get political in your sermons, but that you speak directly and plainly to the moral issues of our time from a distinctly biblical perspective. To remain silent on issues like abortion, homosexuality, same-sex marriage, premarital sex, divorce, sex trafficking, transgenderism, drag queen story hours, and racial prejudice is to be complicit. Judgment begins at the house of God. And finally, number 9, let's start thousands of quality, affordable Christian schools and homeschool co-ops, places where students are taught to view whatever they are learning in the context of the bigger picture that truly matters. That is, the biblical view of God, creation, humanity, moral order, and purpose. Well, there you have 9 practical action steps to consider. Ask God for what direction you can take and what role you might be able to play. May the Lord bless you in your continuing walk with Him through some of the most challenging times we've seen in well over a century.